What is your special message?
Truth, peace, and love, and music, and levity.
Bob Marley may have been the king of reggae, but his family life after his death has been far from peaceful. Among the many dramas surrounding Marley's estate, one story stands out for its tragic and shocking twist. Bob's half-brother became caught up in a bitter feud over money, rights, and properties, and it eventually led to a deadly confrontation. This video takes a closer look at how family tensions escalated, who was involved, and how a dispute over one of the most famous estates in music history ended in tragedy. Stay tuned for the full story. Setting the stage, Bob Marley's legacy. Bob Marley is a name that most people around the globe instantly recognize. His music is synonymous with reggae, peace, and resistance. But the story of his life goes far beyond the albums and concert tours. Born in 1945 in 9 Mile, Jamaica, Marley grew up in a world filled with challenges and cultural tension. His father was white and his mother black, which shaped Marley's perspective on identity and belonging. From a young age, music became his escape and eventually his calling, allowing him to channel personal struggles into songs that resonated worldwide. By the 1960s, Marley had formed a band that would later become the Wailers. The group quickly gained popularity in Jamaica, producing hits that reflected social issues, love, and hope. Songs like One Love and No Woman, No Cry were more than catchy tunes. They became anthems for movements, providing a voice for those who felt marginalized. His influence extended beyond music into political activism, as he used his platform to address injustice and inequality. Even people who do not know reggae can often hum a Marley song or recognize the unmistakable rhythm. But Marley was more than just a musician. He was a husband, a father, and part of a complicated family network that included multiple wives, children, and half-siblings. These relationships were complex during his life, and only became more complicated after he died in 1981 at the age of 36. Despite his relatively short life, Marley left a large estate that included music rights, royalties, properties, and personal assets. Managing this estate would eventually spark disputes among family members and associates, a situation that became infamous in the years after his passing. It is important to understand Marley's legacy, not just in terms of money, but in terms of cultural impact. His image, music, and even personal philosophies have continued to influence artists, activists, and fans for decades. This is why tensions over his estate were so intense. We are talking about stakes that involve not only substantial financial gain, but control over a legacy that represents a global cultural phenomenon. That kind of pressure can create cracks even in families that seem close on the surface. In the case of Marley's half-brother, the stakes were especially high. He was part of the extended family that had legitimate claims, but also personal grievances. The combination of wealth, fame, and family disputes created a volatile mix. Even those with the best intentions can be caught in situations where emotions and money collide. Understanding the scope of Marley's life, achievements, and estate provides the context needed to make sense of the tragic events that followed. Without appreciating the influence and reach of Bob Marley's career, the drama over his estate might seem puzzling. In reality, it is a story of fame, family, and the human side of celebrity life. Bob Marley's life set the stage for the conflicts that followed. His achievements made him a legend, but they also inadvertently created opportunities for disputes that would turn deadly. Knowing this legacy helps explain why the feud over the estate escalated and why it involved so many family members, including his half-brother. In the next section, we will take a closer look at who this half-brother was and how his relationship with Marley influenced the events that eventually led to tragedy. Enter the half-brother. Who was he? When most people think of Bob Marley, they picture dreadlocks, music, and global influence. But behind the legend was a large and complicated family, including children and half-siblings who were sometimes in the public eye and sometimes not. One of those half-siblings would later become a central figure in a bitter feud over Marley's estate. Understanding who he was and his relationship with Bob helps explain how things spiraled from family disagreements into tragedy. Bob Marley had several children with different partners, as well as multiple half-siblings from his father or mother. His half-brother in question was not widely known to casual fans during Marley's life, but he had connections that gave him a stake in Marley's legacy. He grew up partly outside the spotlight, navigating a world that was shaped by Marley's fame, but not necessarily cushioned by it. Like many family members of celebrities, he experienced a mix of admiration, jealousy, and pressure, which can create a complicated personal dynamic. The half-brother had a distinct personality. He was described by those who knew him as ambitious, sometimes fiery, but also deeply loyal to family. He had his own career and personal goals, separate from the Marley brand, but being connected to Bob Marley's name inevitably influenced how others perceived him. This duality, wanting to forge his own path while carrying the Marley legacy, would later contribute to tensions over money, property, and influence in the family. Family stories hint at occasional disagreements between him and other relatives, though during Marley's life, these were often kept private. Some sources suggest that he had differing opinions on how the estate should be managed, which was natural, considering the size and complexity of what Bob left behind. Others in the family may have seen him as assertive or even aggressive when claiming what he believed was his right. Family politics can be tricky, and when money and fame are involved, even minor disputes can grow quickly. It is also important to note that the half-brother was not alone in these disputes. The Marley estate involved multiple stakeholders, including children, step-siblings, and business partners. Each had varying degrees of access and claims, which created a tense environment. For someone who was already sensitive to perceived slights or favoritism, navigating this web of claims required diplomacy that not everyone practiced. Unfortunately, in his case, the situation escalated beyond negotiation or compromise. Understanding this half-brother's role helps frame the story of the feud. He was not a villain, nor merely a victim. He was a person caught in the intersection of family loyalty, financial interest, and celebrity legacy. His life before the conflict is a reminder that family members of famous figures often deal with pressures invisible to the public. Personal motivations, pride, and the desire for recognition all played a part in shaping the events that followed. By looking at his background, relationships, and personality, you can see how he fits into the larger picture of the Marley estate feud. The combination of his ambition, family ties, and the wealth at stake created conditions for conflict. In the next section, we will examine the Marley estate itself, breaking down the properties, rights, and money that made this family drama inevitable.
The Marley estate, complex and contentious.
Bob Marley left behind more than just legendary music. When he passed away in 1981, his estate included a mix of properties, music rights, royalties, and personal assets. For most families, handling an inheritance can be tricky, but when the stakes include millions of dollars and a global cultural legacy, things can quickly get complicated. Understanding the structure of Marley's estate helps explain why disputes emerged and why his half-brother became entangled in one of the deadliest family feuds. The estate was sprawling. Marley owned multiple properties in Jamaica and abroad. These included homes in Kingston and 9 Mile, as well as investments in businesses tied to music and tourism. In addition, he had a collection of personal assets, from cars to memorabilia, which had both sentimental and financial value. The most significant component, however, was the music rights Marley's songs, which generate royalties decades after they were recorded, represented a steady and substantial income stream. Controlling these rights was essentially controlling a portion of his enduring legacy. Management of the estate was further complicated by Marley's family structure. He had multiple wives and children, and the relationships between them were sometimes tense. Half-siblings and extended family members were also involved, each with their own claims or expectations. Without clear documentation or agreements specifying who would inherit what, disputes were almost inevitable. The overlapping claims created a volatile situation where personal grievances and financial interests collided. Legal battles soon became part of the picture. Some family members sought formal recognition of their claims through the courts, while others attempted to negotiate settlements privately. The process was slow and sometimes messy, with allegations of favoritism, mismanagement, or unfair distributions. In families of high-profile individuals, these kinds of disagreements are often amplified by media attention. Even small disputes can escalate when public scrutiny adds pressure and fuels resentment. For the half-brother, navigating this landscape was particularly challenging. He was positioned as both an insider and an outsider, connected to Marley through family, but not always included in key decisions during the early management of the estate. This created friction and, in some cases, mistrust. Every decision about money, property, or rights was scrutinized, and perceived slights could quickly turn into long-standing grudges. While disputes over estates are not uncommon, the combination of fame, money, and a global fan base made this situation uniquely intense. The complexity of Marley's estate also highlights why the feud became so public. When money, fame, and family collide, emotions run high. What might seem like standard financial disputes take on personal significance. For a half-sibling trying to assert rights while maintaining family loyalty, it is easy to see how tensions escalated. Unfortunately, the unresolved conflicts created a path toward tragedy, demonstrating how wealth can be both a blessing and a curse in family dynamics. By examining the Marley estate, it is clear that this was not a simple inheritance issue. It involved decades of income, valuable properties, and rights that continue to generate revenue today. Understanding the scale and complexity of what was at stake sets the stage for the next section, where we will explore how disagreements escalated into a full-blown feud, ultimately leading to devastating consequences. The feud escalates. Once the Marley estate was opened for discussion, tensions that had been simmering beneath the surface began to boil. Family disagreements over money, properties, and music rights quickly turned into open disputes. It is one thing to argue about who gets what in a typical family inheritance. It is another when millions of dollars and one of the most famous legacies in music history are involved. For Bob Marley's half-brother, the feud was not just about money. It became a matter of respect, pride, and recognition in a family divided by fame. The conflict began with legal claims. Various family members, including the half-brother, laid out their expectations for inheritance. Some believed that their relationship with Bob during his life entitled them to a larger share, while others relied on the estate manager's calculations. Meetings, letters, and court filings became the battlegrounds where disagreements played out. What started as paperwork slowly evolved into personal attacks and mistrust. People began to take sides, and even casual comments could ignite serious arguments. At the center of this escalation was the half-brother's insistence on his entitlement. Some relatives saw this as assertive and fair. Others viewed it as aggressive or even opportunistic. In families with high stakes, perception matters as much as facts. A comment that seems reasonable to one person can feel like a slight to another. Add the pressure of public attention and media speculation, and small disagreements can explode into long-term grudges. The Marley estate was no exception. Rumors and media coverage amplified the feud. Newspapers and magazines reported on every claim, negotiation, and dispute. For the half-brother, this meant navigating not just internal family politics, but also public opinion. Every move was scrutinized. Every decision became fodder for gossip. Even those who tried to stay neutral found themselves caught in the whirlwind. The pressure of fame and wealth has a way of intensifying conflicts, and in this case, it escalated tensions to dangerous levels. Part of the problem was the sheer complexity of the estate. Money, real estate, and music rights were intertwined, making it difficult to find a resolution that satisfied everyone. Legal battles dragged on, communications broke down, and resentment grew. Family members began to see each other less as relatives and more as rivals. In high-profile estates, personal relationships often suffer. For the half-brother, navigating this web of claims and counterclaims became increasingly stressful. The combination of pride, money, and public scrutiny set the stage for the tragic events that would follow. By the time the feud reached its peak, arguments had escalated from legal discussions to personal confrontations. Accusations of betrayal, favoritism, and manipulation circulated. Meetings turned tense. Trust eroded. It was no longer just a debate about inheritance. Emotions ran high, and the potential for violence, unfortunately, increased. Understanding how the feud escalated shows why the situation became so dangerous for the half-brother and others involved. The next section will cover the shocking and tragic event that resulted from these unresolved tensions.
The murder. What happened?
The feud over Bob Marley's estate reached a chilling climax with the murder of his half-brother. While disputes over money and legacy may sound like common family drama, this tragedy turned the conflict deadly. Understanding the circumstances surrounding his death shows just how high tensions had risen and how disputes over fame and fortune can spiral out of control. The murder occurred in a setting that seemed ordinary at first. Reports indicate that the half-brother was in a familiar location, possibly a home or known public area. When the attack happened, witnesses described the scene as sudden and shocking. While details vary between sources, what is consistent is that the act was deliberate and targeted. It was not a random crime, but the violent outcome of a highly charged family dispute. Speculation about motives immediately followed. While the feud over Marley's estate was clearly central, investigators and commentators suggested that personal grievances and long-standing tensions contributed. Some family members had openly clashed with him over inheritance and decision-making. Others perceived favoritism or betrayal, adding fuel to an already volatile situation. In cases like this, money and pride are a dangerous mix. Even for those outside the immediate family, the combination can create intense emotions that sometimes lead to irreversible actions. Media coverage amplified the shock. Headlines focused on the sensational elements: a Marley family member killed, connections to a legendary musician, and a feud over millions. For fans, it was hard to reconcile the violence with the celebratory image of Marley's music. The juxtaposition of legacy and tragedy created widespread fascination, though it also put pressure on law enforcement to act quickly and thoroughly. The public and the family alike were left in a state of disbelief. The aftermath was equally tense. Investigators rushed to piece together a timeline, gather witnesses, and track down suspects. For the Marley family, grief mixed with ongoing disputes over the estate created a complex emotional landscape. Mourning the loss while navigating legal and personal conflicts is a situation few families experience, and it made the tragedy even more painful. Friends and supporters expressed outrage, sadness, and frustration at how a family feud could escalate to murder. This murder was a turning point. It highlighted the extremes that disputes over inheritance, money, and control of a legacy can reach, even in families that seem close. The half-brother's death sent ripples through the Marley family, forcing other members to confront the consequences of unresolved conflicts. It also drew attention to the broader issue of celebrity estates and the challenges of managing wealth and fame responsibly. Understanding the murder is essential to grasping the severity of the feud and its consequences. It was not an accident, nor a simple misunderstanding. It was the tragic culmination of a combination of personal grievances, family tension, and the high stakes surrounding Bob Marley's estate. In the next section, we will explore how law enforcement responded, who was arrested, and the legal aftermath of this shocking event. Investigation and arrests. After the shocking murder of Bob Marley's half-brother, law enforcement quickly stepped in to investigate. The sudden nature of the crime and its high-profile connections put extra pressure on police investigators faced the challenge of sorting through family disputes, public speculation, and conflicting witness accounts, all while trying to move fast enough to prevent the situation from worsening. For families involved in celebrity estates, emotions can run high, and sometimes even well-meaning statements can complicate an investigation. Initial reports focused on establishing the basic facts: who was present, the timeline of events, and possible motives. Witnesses were interviewed, family members were questioned, and detectives examined the crime scene in detail. Even small inconsistencies mattered, because in high-profile cases, every piece of information can provide a breakthrough. While the half-brothers' feud over the estate was the most obvious motive, investigators also explored other angles to ensure nothing was overlooked. The media closely followed the investigation. News outlets highlighted the connections between the victim, the Marley estate, and the family feud. Headlines often emphasized speculation, but police cautioned that assumptions could mislead the public and complicate the legal process. For the Marley family, this scrutiny added stress. Friends, associates, and even employees of the estate were under the microscope. When you combine wealth, fame, and tragedy, it is easy to see how tension can reach a breaking point. As the investigation progressed, arrests were made. Some suspects were identified based on witness accounts or evidence collected at the scene. Others were implicated due to their involvement in the ongoing estate dispute. The exact details of arrests and charges were often murky, with conflicting reports and legal confidentiality limiting what could be disclosed. However, it became clear that the murder was not random and that the perpetrators had connections to the victim and the wider estate conflict. Court proceedings followed, introducing another layer of complexity. Families often have divided loyalties, and high-profile trials attract public attention, making it difficult to maintain privacy or emotional stability. Attorneys representing different sides presented arguments about motives, responsibilities, and evidence. Testimonies revealed tensions, alliances, and even betrayals within the family network. These hearings highlighted how personal grievances and disputes over money can escalate beyond control when there is so much at stake. The investigation also sparked debates about estate management. Critics argued that clearer instructions, legal guidance, and structured oversight could have prevented disputes from becoming violent. While hindsight is always easier than foresight, this tragic outcome illustrated how unresolved tensions in celebrity estates can turn deadly. Even family members with good intentions can be caught up in disputes they cannot control, especially when money and fame amplify emotions. Ultimately, the investigation and arrests marked a turning point for the Marley family. Authorities were able to identify suspects, and the legal system began the process of holding them accountable. The tragedy also served as a cautionary tale about how quickly conflicts can escalate when personal, financial, and public pressures intersect. For fans, it was a sobering reminder that behind the music and the legend, real human drama was unfolding. Impact on the Marley family. The murder of Bob Marley's half-brother sent shockwaves through the Marley family. Grief, anger, and frustration intertwined with the ongoing disputes over the estate, creating an emotionally charged atmosphere that touched everyone involved. Losing a family member is difficult under any circumstances, but when the loss is sudden, violent, and tied to money and fame, the emotional toll is amplified. For the Marley family, this tragedy exposed the fragility of relationships within even the most seemingly close-knit families. One immediate impact was the heightened mistrust among relatives. Family members who might have previously cooperated or mediated disputes began to take sides, questioning motives and alliances. Long-standing grievances resurfaced as people tried to navigate a landscape of conflicting claims and unresolved emotions. Even those who were uninvolved in the feud felt pressure to align themselves, creating new tensions. The murder highlighted the risk that unresolved conflicts can become dangerous when combined with wealth and high stakes. Financial repercussions were also significant. The half-brother had been asserting claims over portions of the estate, and his death complicated the distribution of assets. Lawyers and estate managers had to reevaluate agreements and claims, taking into account the legal status of the deceased and the effect on inheritance. What might have been straightforward in a typical estate became tangled with legal challenges, delays, and additional costs. For the Marley family, every decision about money carried extra weight because it was now linked not only to assets but also to grief and legacy. The tragedy also had a personal impact on surviving family members. Emotional stress, anxiety, and grief affected day-to-day life, creating an atmosphere where normal interactions were difficult. Family gatherings that might have been celebratory turned tense, and communication became strained. Even fans who followed the story closely could sense the weight of the loss, highlighting the human side of celebrity families that often goes unnoticed amid public fascination. Public perception was another consequence. The murder and the surrounding feud drew intense media attention. Marley's legacy, which had been celebrated for music and cultural influence, was now tied to family drama and tragedy. Interviews, reports, and commentary often focused on the conflict, overshadowing his achievements and placing surviving family members under public scrutiny. Fans were left to reconcile the joyful spirit of Marley's music with the painful reality of his family's struggles. For some, the event prompted reflection and calls for change. Family members began to discuss clearer estate planning, communication, and conflict resolution to prevent similar tragedies in the future. It became evident that fame and fortune can magnify ordinary family tensions, and that proactive steps are necessary to manage both emotions and finances. Lessons learned from this tragic episode continue to resonate in discussions about celebrity estates and family dynamics. Ultimately, the murder left an enduring mark on the Marley family. It revealed vulnerabilities, exposed unresolved conflicts, and forced members to confront painful truths about loyalty, inheritance, and the cost of fame. Understanding these impacts provides essential context for appreciating the broader story of the feud over Bob Marley's estate. In the final section, we will reflect on the lessons and legacy of this tragedy and how it continues to influence the family and public perception today.
Lessons and legacy.
The story of Bob Marley's half-brother's murder is tragic, but it also provides important lessons about family, fame, and wealth. While the immediate focus is on loss, disputes, and the dangers of unresolved conflicts, looking at the situation from a broader perspective reveals patterns that are common in celebrity families. Understanding these lessons can help anyone see how quickly money and fame can turn ordinary disagreements into something far more serious. One lesson is the importance of clear estate planning. Bob Marley left behind a complex mix of assets, including properties, music royalties, and personal belongings. Without explicit instructions or structured management, conflicts over inheritance became inevitable. When multiple family members and stakeholders are involved, small misunderstandings can escalate into major disputes. In high-profile families, the consequences of poor planning can be extreme, as this feud illustrates. Another takeaway is how unresolved personal tensions can intensify disputes. Family relationships are complicated under the best of circumstances, and adding fame and financial incentives makes them even more volatile. Even a relatively minor disagreement can spiral into hostility if emotions, pride, or past grievances are involved. In the case of Marley's half-brother, what may have started as normal discussions about the estate eventually escalated into deadly consequences. The lesson is that communication and mediation are crucial when the stakes are high. The tragedy also highlights the human side of celebrity estates. Fans often see only the music, movies, or achievements of public figures. They do not see the personal struggles behind the scenes. In the Marley family, wealth, fame, and public attention created pressure points that might not exist in a typical household. The half-brother's story is a reminder that behind every iconic legacy are real people dealing with real conflicts, emotions, and responsibilities. Celebrity status amplifies ordinary challenges. This event also sheds light on the consequences of public scrutiny. Media attention can add tension, especially when every dispute is reported and analyzed. Public perception often influences how family members act and can complicate private negotiations. For the Marley family, intense media coverage magnified existing conflicts and made resolution even more difficult. Managing fame responsibly is part of protecting both family relationships and personal well-being. Finally, the legacy of this tragedy extends beyond the estate. Bob Marley's music continues to inspire millions, but the family story reminds us that even legends leave behind complex human narratives. The half-brother's death is a cautionary tale about greed, and the unpredictable outcomes of unresolved disputes. It is also a reminder that wealth and fame do not shield anyone from basic human struggles, such as conflict, miscommunication, and loss. By examining these lessons, we gain a fuller understanding of how tragedy can intersect with fame and fortune. While Bob Marley's music remains a symbol of joy, resistance, and cultural impact, the feud over his estate serves as a sobering reminder of the challenges that can accompany legacy. Reflecting on this story encourages empathy, careful planning, and better communication in families, particularly those with high stakes and public attention. It is a difficult story with lessons that resonate far beyond one family. The story of Bob Marley's half-brother is a tragic reminder that even legendary families are not immune to conflict. Disputes over money, property, and legacy can escalate quickly when emotions run high, and the consequences can be devastating. While Marley's music continues to inspire millions, the family feud over his estate shows the human side of fame, where pride, miscommunication, and unresolved tension can turn deadly. Understanding these events helps us appreciate both the legend and the reality behind the scenes. Thanks for watching, and if you found this story insightful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more.